Or do you go by Olboy Melon, or how can we address you for people here in Honolulu and people in Chicago?
That's a good question. I mean, my real name is Nicky, Nicky James. Some people know me as Melon. Some people know my real name, Nicky, but they prefer to call me Melon, um, or Melon. And yeah, it's kind of interesting because some people don't even know my real name. Um, and then when they find out my real name, they're like, "Oh, wow, that's Nicky's a totally different name for sure."
I had a chance to catch you in between breaks. If you ever want to talk to an artist at powwow, wait till the hottest time of the day when they're looking for shade and their
Yeah,
lunch, and then
chasing the shade.
they're taking a little bit of a break. Yeah. So
Yeah, totally.
I remember again, I was just like, I had all these questions about your artwork and your inspiration. You were so kind and generous to do that. I know most
Mm,
artists don't like to because it's just like it's on the canvas, it's on a wall, it's on a shirt, it's on somebody's album, it's
yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
already. So it's like to explain it, it just might kind of take away from its message.
I did graffiti, so I think because of the graffiti mentality, I was always like trying to like I'm a very sociable person.
Yeah.
So it was always hard for me as a graffiti artist or a graffiti writer, even for that matter, to hide my art skills. Um, and I think my wife now, she was just more of like, no, you need to expose that. You need to stop hiding out in the shadows. Like you need to start bringing your stuff out more
Hmm.
and be more public about it and talk more about it. For a very long time, I had this thing of like I do want people to see my work, but they don't need to know who I am. Like you said, it's on a shirt, it's on a, that's cool, leave it there, but yeah, I just didn't want myself and my story. I guess just tried to keep my art, and me. Yeah.
What year did you jump from just doing tags and just putting up to having it featured in a gallery or
Mm.
people saying, "Oh, can I buy a print?" or you should have this on a shirt.
That's interesting because when I was in Chicago, all I did, I was a graffiti, what we call a graffiti writer,
Yeah.
Um, I painted as much as I could on the streets, and that's where I got my style, like my tag style, my throw up style. I was just always doing like graffiti, graffiti, graffiti. So when I came here to Hawaii in 2001, I was like, I really thought I was just gonna, you know, destroy Hawaii with graffiti, and so I did what I could, and then I met my previous wife, Marlo, who was a DJ, and she was with a group called Sisters in Sound, which at the time was a great group, and they're still active DJs as well, so that's cool. Um, but she introduced me to some people, and they were more into not only graffiti but into the art scene. And it wasn't until in Hawaii that I was really participating in the graffiti scene out here that taught me a lot. Where I was from Chicago and I was doing all these like stuff and hurry, 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 let's get it done, get it done, get out. Here it was more like, hey, take your time, let's do this together. Let's put these colors together. Let's match this together. And I was like, whoa, this was a whole different scene that I ever experienced. So I fell in love with it, and I think that's where I started to grow as an artist. The artist, I guess, inside of me just started to come out, and um, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one of my first gallery shows was with. Are you familiar with Lofa? Do you know Lofa?
Hmm.
He was always in him and Aaron Wolves were always involved with like art scene. It was them that put me into this art scene, and Lofa was like, "Hey, is there another name that you can put on the flyer?" And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, because you do a lot of graffiti, and I don't want to get you in trouble or anything." And I was like, "Well, I don't want." I was like, "I don't know." Like, so that's how I came up with the name Melon James. My former wife, Marlo, she was just like, oh, yeah, you should use your middle name, James. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And it just stayed. Melon James was like, I felt was like a good name. It was still using my name. And I never used my middle name. So I was like, what's the point of having a middle name if you don't use it? You know, so I figured this is a good idea to use it. So I did. And Melon James became me. Oh, Melon. So I was a kid. My background is Puerto Rican and Guatemalan. Right? My mom's Puerto Rican, my dad's Guatemalan. But in neighborhood, I grew up in the city, and when you grow up in a city full of kids, where there's like 30 kids in the neighborhood, everybody picks on each other. We would sit around and tell your mama jokes. But I couldn't say Guatemalan as a kid. I would say watermelon. And it was weird
Oh, that's
because
adorable. Yeah.
I would hear them say, "Oh, soy guatemalteco," and it sounds like, "Oh, watermelon. I'm watermelon. Yeah, I'm Puerto Rican and watermelon." So when I would tell people, they just made fun of me. Hey, you're a melon. You're a melon,
Oh, that's hot.
and it stayed with me. So I started getting interested in graffiti because of my brother, my older brother. And I was
His
nagging
name.
him, bro. His name is Tone. Good guy. He's a great guy, actually. He just kept nagging me, like, "Hey, just leave me alone. Here, just you already have a name." Like I could go to a grocery store and people would say, "Where's the melon?" And I'll turn around. Yeah.
Oh, for real.
Like, oh, somebody calling me.
When you first started doing your graffiti, what
Mhm.
was there a style that caught your eye that you were like that 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 either looks
Oh,
easy and you copped it and then you're like I can expand on it, or from out the gate you're like, no, this is my style, I've never seen it before, I've created fonts before you knew what fonts
yeah,
were.
yeah, yeah. No,
Everybody,
that's
yeah.
funny. That's funny that you say that. For almost a year and a half, maybe two, I would go out with my brother on these graffiti missions when we were kids. 1989,
Ooh,
1990.
oh my god,
Yeah,
you must have
so
been
I
like
would,
in a stroller, my gosh. Vivid
yeah,
night.
I think I was like 10 years old or something like that. Uh, no, I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old. Yeah, that my brother would take me out on so my parents used to sleep upstairs and our bedrooms were downstairs. So, if your bedrooms are downstairs, it's easy to sneak out, right? So we
Hey,
would sneak out all the time and we would go on these like graffiti missions and he would tell me, "Hey, just look out for me. Look out, look out, look out." And I was so fascinated by like the adrenaline rush, the spray, like climbing a rooftop and looking around. But at the same time, I was just like not paying attention to what I was supposed to do, which was look out. And I would just stare at my brother while he's painting, him and his friends, and I would just stare and stare. And he'd turn around, "Hey, what are you doing? Look out." And I'm like, oh, that's right, that's right. Yeah, he just kept telling me I cannot paint or pick up a spray can until I get my style because I was a toy.
mhm.
And so I practiced and I was like, oh, I'm going to be good at this. And it was like the best thing for me because like between that time, I was already involved, getting so involved like with like the gang activity. I looked like a nerd, a little kid with glasses. Who's gonna pick on this kid, So they would send some of the guys in the neighborhood would send me to do like certain things, like tasks for them. Hey, drop this off over here, drop this off over there, and I would jump on my bike. "Ma, I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go around the block real quick," and then I would go around the block, and instead of going around the block, pick up what I got to do, and do what did what I did. My bedroom at when I was a kid, it was like a dividing line between two gangs. So the window was the dividing line for one gang, but I could see a lot of their activities whenever they had their juntas, and juntas is their meetings or whatever. But I could see everything organizing, and when I was a kid, it was like they had cooler names than GI Joes, and you had GI Joes that had cool names, right? But then you had these guys who were like real life gangbangers, and they were like had cool names, you know. And I was fascinated by that. That I was like, I want to be that guy in the middle who's talking to everybody, and everybody's like respecting that dude. Like I wanted to be that guy. But then my brother came with the graffiti book like a few years later. We moved into another neighborhood, and he came with the graffiti book, and it just like blew my mind. That was like, whoa, what is this? And I like everything that was like gang related, just kind of like, but I was already involved that I couldn't just leave, you know? So yeah, graffiti was like, okay, I love comic books, I love art, I loved Walt Disney, I love Warner Brothers, you know, like, and Looney Tunes, oh, forget it, that was my favorite. But yeah, my brother really changed helped me change my life through that graffiti. And I think graffiti kind of got me into more artistic paths and led me, you know, through these stages in my life for sure.
When you were doing the artwork, were you also part of the hip hop? Because it doesn't necessarily go together. Where like it's the street art and the people who create the clothing and the music and the
Yeah,
boys and the B girls and all that sort of.
yeah,
Then there's the management, the
yeah,
people who are profiting.
yeah,
How do they do that?
yeah,
Huh?
yeah.
But were you a dancer too? Did you roll with any kind of crews?
Oh yeah, I break danced. I was into hip hop. Me, my brother, my cousin. We had this one group. We were called Storytellers, and
Great
it
name.
was yeah, it was the Storytellers, and the Storytellers. Man, it was so the mid '90s was an exciting time because like one there was so much gang like involvement in my life, but like there was all this magical stuff that was like being formed by hip hop that like took me into this whole world that was like pushing this away, and I needed that, you know. And unfortunately a lot of my, you know, friends and there's some, you know, some family members, they didn't see it, but for me it was something that was magical. Hip hop was huge in my life. The one album that changed my life, I to this day I think was Midnight Marauders, um, where the narrator of the album was like, you're more of a man if you don't pull the trigger and not necessarily a man if you do, or something like that along those lines. But I was like, whoa, like to me I was like, wait, what? Like I could be dope and I don't have to be a gangbanger. You know what I mean? Like it was just like something that was it was interesting to hear those words, you know. So that album really changed. And then when I got into high school, I was in an all boys school. So you can imagine all boys school, all testosterone, everybody picking on each other, fighting with each other. Through that, I met a lot of people that were into hip hop and into graffiti, into the same things. And then there was the gang crowd, and it was like funny because I was like cool. I became pretty cool with everybody. Like like if somebody picked on me, I had the gang crowd that was ready to back me up, and or I could just make a phone call and my brother would show up with like some people, you know. But then I was also fascinated with comic books, and so there was like the comic book club, and I would like hang out with the guys, you know. And a lot of the people in comic industry, they're 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 nerds, yeah, but they're cool nerds, right? That's how I saw it. It's like, yeah, they're cool nerds. I think hip hop was so involved with the lifestyle that I was in, but then not just hip hop, because you had Chicago house music, you had
Oh, yeah.
um, you know, you had Nirvana type music coming in. So it was a really interesting for me as an artist being so heavily involved with graffiti and then being tied with graffiti and hip hop, and then realizing that I don't just need to focus on hip hop, I could expand. But yeah, I did involve myself in a lot of hip hop activities, but I was not always like involved with like everything hip hop, you know? Like I loved rock, I loved classical music, I loved jazz. Blues fests in Chicago were amazing.
Did you ever call it graffiti? Did you call it street art back then? Or you were just like, I'm just tagging? When did you move from tagging
No.
to putting up figures? And
Oh.
the face is usually an oval, but
Mm.
and it has a line down and a line across.
I call them basic drawing, the basic like face drawing lines, the guidelines for face. I want to say around 2002. I was, my brother at that time, he was locked up for a while already. So I had just joined the Navy. I had some friends that were definitely character artists. One of them was Cove. This other guy, Anthony Llewellyn, and Chris Silva. Anthony Llewellyn and Chris Silva, I didn't know back then, but I knew of their work in Chicago, and their work was a major influence to me as growing up in the graffiti community in Chicago. But I got in trouble in Chicago, ended up joining the military, got into the Navy, and by 2002, I started playing around with characters. I remember writing. I was thinking of my brother, and I felt like I was losing touch of like what my brother was gonna be like or who he was, because he was stuck in this prison system. He was in maximum security, and I can only imagine how tough that must have been on him. And I created this drawing of me and my brother, but I didn't put our faces on it, and I just put those basic drawing lines. And it was a skinny guy with a big fat guy. My brother was bigger than. If you look at me and my brother side to side, you'll be like, damn, these guys are like twins, except I'm like his mini me. Like he looks exactly like me, but he's like 6 feet tall and
Wow.
massive. Yeah. I created this drawing. Matter of fact, I have the drawing here. And it was like the first time I created that character. And I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. So I remember going out to, this is another thing. I went out to the ditches out here, this one graffiti writer out here, and I had no idea what graffiti in Hawaii was like. And when I got taken down to this ditch, I was like, what is this? This was like, it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing I have ever experienced. Man, because in Chicago, there wasn't places that were like this. And it's funny because there has been people that have come down here from other cities or states, and they're just like, I've never seen anything like this. This is crazy. I think maybe LA might have some ditches like that, but here it's incredible. I don't know. My first reaction was like, I'm in heaven. I can paint all day, and no one's gonna bother me. Like, but yeah, I painted those characters in the ditches, and yeah, the feeling was okay. Like, I rushed it so fast, and I was done, and I looked around, and these guys are still painting, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? Like, shouldn't we get out of here? And they're just like, oh no, chill, yeah. And I was just like, okay. So I started chilling a little bit, and then that's when I realized, oh man, this is where I can actually create graffiti pieces, murals. And I was like, okay. So I started doing that, and then I started meeting more people, and I met lifelong friends out here because of it. And it's also taught me a lot as far as like the artistry goes. Graffiti has become not only just a life, but it's become a lifestyle, not only for me, but for everyone who was involved in it and who was involved in it from back then. It's
Yeah.
become a lifestyle that is transitioned to street art now. And with that term street art, that wasn't a thing back then. So it was kind
The
of
art
interesting
part.
to see. Yeah, the art part, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting to see where it's at now versus where it was back then. This is my life. Like I've delved so far deep into it that it's become a part of me.
When I would see street art, the thing that
Hmm.
I just can't get over is the scale. How you
Hmm.
can just proportion it to like the side of a wall. And I know it's math. Was that intimidating, or was something that you're like bigger? It's like everybody who does murals are like, that's what we want. It's just like, give me like Epcot, that ball at Epcot.
Doing something in a large scale obviously is good for graffiti writers, especially because we excuse my language, we want to be seen, right? You
Yeah.
want the world to see it. I haven't been doing large scale murals for a very long time, so the process of me doing large scale murals is still somewhat new to me. I can do pretty decent sized graffiti pieces, doing large scale murals, I would say it has been pretty challenging for me. Like I really have to sit down. I don't just go to a wall now that's a large scale mural and just be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna do it like this. You know, there's one guy that I mean, I don't know how he plans it out, but I admire to this day on how he really does his walls. And he's from Hawaii. He's the original graffiti guy from Hawaii, by Catch One. He's one of those guys that can actually like, you give him a wall any size, and he, you know, most people they're gonna grid it out, they're gonna project, you know, they're gonna measure mathematically, but he's like, nope, I'm gonna look at every structure of this wall and figure out, okay, that window I'm gonna use that for this door I'm gonna use that for that crack in the wall I'm gonna use that for this, and he figures it out. That's amazing when you can do large scale murals like the way he does, because that's the way it really I think is a good, as a graffiti writer, to utilize the space that you have, you know, not just like, well, I have this, you know, that's what I do. I have this drawing, I'm going to grid it out, I'm going to do like this. But Catch is like, yo, give me the wall, I'll make it happen.
Oh, not at
That's a
all.
graffiti writer's mentality that I think is like, oh yeah, utilize the space that you got.
Right now you're in a space where you're doing a lot of waves, and I don't know if that's
Mm.
because your wife is a surfer.
It's really interesting because one, my wife does surf. She's heavily into surfing. Unfortunately, she can't be surfing as much as she'd like to because of what's going on, but she's heavily into surfing. And but I've always been fascinated by the movement of water and how water flows. A lot of my time escaping from reality in Chicago when I was a kid was going to the lake. Like I would get out of the neighborhood, I would get out of my environment, and I would go to Lake Michigan and I would just sit there. And it's such a massive body of water that people don't realize here, especially here in Hawaii, they don't realize, oh, you're in Chicago, like that's like a toilet bowl, you know. But no, if you, it's the world's largest toilet bowl, you know, if you think about it. We would go in groups to the beach, and we would sit at this one place called Diversity Harbor, and we would drink 40s. You know, we were 14, 15, drinking 40s, smoking blunts, you know, acting crazy at the beach, you know, and it was like on the rocks too. So we would be all the way down where the cops they didn't really care back then, you know. Now they lock it down. No, you can't go in past 11 p.m. It was like back then we'd be there till 3, 4 in the morning, you know, like, yeah. Having that ties to coming here, when I came here, this was mind blowing. Hawaii was incredible.
What
Like
brought you out here?
eh, the Navy, I came out here with the
Yeah,
Navy.
okay.
Yeah. And so, um, yeah, this really intrigued me that I didn't realize, like, you know, I have family in Puerto Rico. So I've been to Puerto Rico. To me it reminded me of Puerto Rico, but it was like Puerto Rico on steroids as far as like nature goes, you know. It was just like, this is amazing. I think the more I started to realize movements of water, that's what I wanted to start painting, you know, when I got into the drawing water and stuff like that. But then I started finding other artists, and I created this one pattern one time, and this one artist told me, oh, you know, like, oh, it looks like a Hokusai influence. And I was like, what? I was like, whoever that guy is, he's a biter taking my style. You know, like, little did I know, you know, I was not informed with any type of artistry, like famous artists besides like Picasso and Leonardo da Vinci, you know, all the
The
Ninja Turtles.
Europeans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was like, okay. I looked them up, and I was like really amazed by like, holy crap, like this was beyond. That's when I started getting fascinated with like, I guess, nature-esque stuff. You know, I started trying to figure out how I could put these female characters that I was painting, and how I could put these like nature around her, you know, and just like make her surrounding more beautiful with nature-esque type environment. And so I started working with that. But then I come out here, I meet Kaori in 2015. I came out here and met Kaori, and she was heavily into surfing. and she was telling me about the different types of waves. And to me, I'm like, I I don't know what you're talking about. That looks like because they would go to the beach and they would be like, oh, look, get waves. Or they would ask the question, hey, get waves. And they would be like, get waves. Or, nah. So I'm like, get waves, get waves. I realized like the question or the answer, Yeah, get waves. Yeah. And I started trying to figure out, okay, I went out there maybe once
You got to do it
and
once.
oh man, I got beat up because I can't see without my glasses. So I was like, so this was bad. This was a bad situation. But I realized, yeah, there was different types of waves that were hitting me. She would like, oh yeah, this is this type of wave. And then I would feel how it hit me. And then, because I couldn't see. But then I would see another wave and I was like, oh man, it was already too late. But then she started telling me about the patterns and how they go. And I was like, to me, it's like a wave. It's like, you tell me like what a person looks like, two legs and arms, whatever. But it's like, I started putting them together, where waves were just like people, except each wave had its own pattern, its own way of movement, its own fingerprint, and just like humans, that's what we got. We have our own uniqueness to who we are, the way we move, the way we go about things. And there's waves out there in the middle of the ocean that are completely massive. There are monsters, right? And then you have these small waves that are cakey waves, like in Waikiki or something. So that's kind of where I started developing this more rhythmic motion of like my wave patterns and how I can keep them the movement the same. However, every line and stroke was different, so giving the wave its own uniqueness, its own vibrantness. And that's the whole purpose behind the Get Wave series, which I'm still developing, I think, into something more of a chaotic base, where like now I'm like getting involved with like the process of like painting in the rain, painting a wave in the dark, painting a wave blindfolded. I'm using one where I'm hanging a string and a brush and gonna paint a wave like that. But it's like now getting more into like me connecting with the painting and still creating this whole like uniqueness of each wave.
When you're doing your artwork, do you only focus on one theme at a time, or do you, because it's like whatever is happening, that's your muse?
I'm all over the place, and um, I, so my wife, she's a professor and she's a director of a graduate program at UH, and it's incredible how her brain functions. She's more boom, 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 everything in order. This me, I'm like here, 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 oh there. I could be in the middle of a conversation and be like, oh, squirrel, you know. So fortunately and unfortunately, that's how I work. Fortunately is the fact that I can actually produce something so quick and on the fly, or I can take my time and produce it. But unfortunately, it's like in the sense of like, okay, I'm here now I'm here, and now I'm here. But if I take all these and put them all together, I can probably create something more masterful, I guess.
It's like because you're doing art and you're able to, your lifestyle is able to support it. Or actually, how were you able to continue to do art as a source of happiness, livelihood? It
Oh,
doesn't disrupt your marriage. You know.
yeah, I've been fortunate to always surround myself with people who were very accepting of who I was as an artist, and having that is huge in someone's life, especially for artists. Like we, if there's some times where I hear of people relationships, I guess, being messed up because of like the lifestyle of an artist. Lifestyle of an artist can be tricky, it's if especially if If you're an artist that you know where your stuff is gonna go, where you're gonna go, like that's fantastic. But a lot of artists are more on the fly type artists that they don't know where they're gonna go, or they don't know how to uh, um, uh, properly like navigate as an artist. And I think that's one thing that's a learning curve for me, where I now, especially now in this time, where it's this is like, I feel like a true test of like, okay, can I do this as an artist for real? The one thing I think as an artist is you never stop creating, no matter what, and you always got to continue to create. Creating is what brings you out through especially what we're going through. If this guides you throughout the whole time, like, so be it. For me, I don't want it to just be for me. I want what I'm doing to be able to help others, and I know that as an artist now, I'm growing into a certain artist that eventually I want to be able to share with others what I've gone through and how I've gone about it. One thing I think that a lot of artists lack is the business intelligence, as far as like how to run a successful, or I wouldn't even say successful, how to run themselves as a brand, as a business, as an artist. And I think that's my next phase, where I'm kind of like slowly easing back on more of the trying to do all the social media and branding myself, where I think in my next step is really reinventing myself and come back as a stronger person to be able to help others in creating a good foundation as an artist. And first I have to find that for myself, and build this foundation for myself, and then come back and do that for others. But I know that at the end goal, like one of my things is definitely be a source of like where people artists can come to and say, hey, I'm this type of artist and I need help. I want the guidance. And if I can provide that, like that's my goal in the future, to be able to provide that. And I don't know. I don't even know if I would, like, depending on where the artist is. There's so many people out there that are like, oh yeah, well, if you pay me this, uh, you know, and I understand it's all about money, but a lot of these artists, they don't have the money, and they don't even know where they're gonna get their next materials, or their food from. So like, you have these new progressions of like artists using any type of material, like makeup to make art, or soap to make paint. So it's like really interesting what people can do when they're pushed against the wall. And if I can help those like do that, that would be great.
You were mentioning people here in Hawaii that helped you kind of set a foundation and find your way. In Chicago, who's some of the people in the art scene or the street art scene that you can
Mm.
kind of remember and recognize as mentors?
When I was a kid, like dude, like I mentioned before, there was this one guy, Anthony Llewellyn, and this guy Chris Silva, and those two guys, I didn't know them, but I've seen their work, and they influenced me. They influenced me, I guess, like silent influencers, right? Just seeing their work was like, okay, I really can see myself doing that. And I think that Chris Silva is one of those guys that he was like one of the first graffiti writers that was, in my eyes, was a street artist, because he started doing these murals that nobody else was doing, like late 90s, or early 2000s, but like nobody was doing that. And I was like, wow, how is that possible? And graffiti writers, we have this thing of like, if somebody goes into the arts, mainstream or whatever, they're a sellout, right? And so, but no one ever looked at Chris Silva that way. So I found that really interesting. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, this guy, he's really doing that. And then you look at this other graffiti writer who's doing that, but he's doing this, and everybody's like, oh, what a sellout. But then you look at Chris Silva, and you're like, yo, that's dope. Like this guy's killing it. So I was always intrigued on like how he was doing that. People like my friend Cove, who always doing characters. He was like a big brother to me. He was actually like my brother's friend at first, and then he became my friend. He would always tell me, "Oh man, you should try this. Stop doing that. Try this. Try this. Or don't be afraid to go off the paper and come back on the other side, you know, or off the wall and come back." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Don't limit yourself to this box. You know, come out and come back in." I was like, "Oh wow, that's crazy." And I took those advices like that. And then you had like people who were down, like Casey and Civil, that they were just street bombers and they were just crushing the streets. And that was an influence to me because of the adrenaline rush, because I loved that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go and crush these streets like these guys. But they were kings of Chicago right now, I think, or um, back then, you know. But there's still so many influences in Chicago. Like even now, like when street art started getting popular, there was a lot of other artists that were coming out that weren't graffiti writers, but they were still artists, and they were being hated on by other graffiti writers who were like, "Oh, these guys never did graffiti. Why are they holding a spray can?" You know. And at first, I felt like that. You know, like, "Oh, who are these guys?" I'm not gonna lie. I was a hater. You know, I was and I had to recognize my own fault, which was like, why am I hating? Like, this person is really doing what he loves to do, even though it's not graffiti. And at the same time, he's putting a, you know, he's putting a plate of food on the table for his family. So I felt like that was probably something that I really needed to assess my vision as an artist, and instead of like enclose myself in this box and just be like, all right, this is the only thing that matters as an artist. And I needed to get outside of that, especially with the way my brain was functioning at that time. I was just like, all right, I got to get out, like, and explore more and be open-minded more, especially with my art form. It's, you know, because graffiti has evolved in so many ways that it's hard to keep up with these new kids now. You know, it's just,
But what's the difference
but the,
nowadays? What is it? The types of the medium that they're using, or because as a layperson to the craft and art and lifestyle of
uh-huh.
graffiti.
So when it comes to the street art, it's definitely evolved in the sense that like more people are doing, they're being more bold, more braver on doing different types of stuff. But as far as graffiti goes, like it is, I think the graffiti side is still the same concept, is get up as much as you can, but they're becoming more braver in certain things that they weren't doing probably back then. They're going bigger, and they're going cleaner. And I mean, they're starting to use more, I guess, I don't know, it's pretty good tactics, like military tactics, to like get through a spot, you know, to make sure that this is
Oh,
going to be done, you know. Versus back then, it was like, all right, let's go look at this spot. We eye it, get up there, paint it, get down, leave, you know. But now these guys are like really doing some impressive things that I'm happy where it's gone. But yeah, as someone, like, if I was to continue to do that, like, well, I got a lot of catching up to do. You know what I mean? You know, to me, because I am I was so heavily involved in graffiti, like I enjoy the passion of writing your name on a wall, you know. I understood it, I felt it, I've been there. You should try it. No, I'm just kidding.
right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know, there's no actually rules as to, some people were like, oh, we only stick to public places. Some people are like, I don't care, everything goes. Some people are like, I don't do churches. Or I think it's an individual thing, as to how far you want it to go. Um, you know, for me, I don't go out there anymore. It's been years since I've gone out there because I've grown up, I guess, you know, and um, so much more to lose, yeah. So I still do appreciate, because like it's that tag that has gone into a throw up, and that throw up that has gone into a piece, and that piece that has gone into a mural, and that mural that has gone into someone becoming a very successful artist. You have plenty people out there that are successful because of where they came from just writing your name on the wall. I don't think graffiti's ever going to go away. It's something that's always going to exist no matter what. And there's different types of graffiti, you know, like bathroom graffiti, gang graffiti, artistic graffiti, scribble graffiti, 1-800 number graffiti, you know.